Chapter 4 Two Killers in the Tempest. All right, let's fight again, Wan and Honxi proclaimed out loud. Unexpectedly, the forward scouts came back with a different report. The Yong Khan is here to personally welcome the two Jin princes. Temujin, Jamuka, and Sengam immediately rode forward to greet him. From the dust clouds, an army emerged. With several hundred personal guards with him, the Yong Khan rode up, rolled off of the back of his horse in one easy movement, then with his adopted sons Temujin and Jamuka at his side, approached and kneeled before the two princes. He was a rather chubby man with glittering silver hair. He wore a robe made of the finest black leopard furs that were held in place by a golden belt around his waist. The way he carried himself was one of great dignity and confidence. Wanyan Hongli hurriedly got off his own horse and returned the gesture, but Wanyan Hongxi remained on his horse and merely replied by cupping his fists. Your humble servant just heard the news of the Nayman's rudeness and was worried that your highnesses might have been disturbed. Your humble servant brought a force here as soon as possible. But fortunately, due to your highness' awe-inspiring presence, the three kids were able to defeat them. The Yong Khan spoke. Next, he took the lead and courteously led the Wanyan brothers all the way back to his own jir. The inside of his jir was covered with leopard and fox furs and well fitted with the finest furniture and wares. Even his personal guards were dressed in more luxurious clothing than those of Temujin's guard, not to mention Temujin and his son. The bellowing of horns continuously sounded for several kilometers surrounding the jir. Men and horses bustled about, giving an atmosphere of something great going on. Never had the Wanyan brothers seen anything approaching such grandeur since they've been outside the Great Wall. After the ceremony of bestowing the title was finished, everyone settled down. That night, Ong Khan held a huge banquet in the big jir to celebrate the arrival of the Wanyan brothers. Scores of female slaves danced for entertainment as the banquet progressed late into the night. It became quite lively and was miles apart from the simple and slightly backwater reception they received from Temujin's tribe. Wanyan Hongxi was having one hell of a time. Two female slaves had caught his fancy and he was pondering ideas in his head. It never occurred to him to talk to Ong Khan. After about half of the komas had been consumed, Wanyan Hongli turned to the Yong Khan. Your heroic deeds are known far and wide. Even we who reside within the Great Wall have long admired your greatness. But I really want to meet some of the heroes of the younger generation of Mongolians. He said. Well, my two adopted sons just happen to be the two greatest heroes of Mongolia. The Yong Khan responded with a smile. Sengam, his own son who sat to one side, did not react well on hearing this and began downing one cup of kalmas after another. Your own son is another hero, why aren't mentioning him? Wanyan Hongli asked, taking note of Sengam's displeasure. After I die, he will naturally take over my tribe. The Yong Khan smiled and replied. But can he compare with his two adopted brothers? Jamuka is smart and intelligent. Temujin is even more brave and courageous. He started with nothing and made himself into what he is today with his own hands. What Mongol warrior wouldn't want to put his life in their hands and serve them? Does that mean that the generals under Hero Ong don't compare to Temujin Khan's generals? Wanyan Hongli queried. Noticing that there was a hint of instigation in his words, Temujin shot a look towards Wanyan Hongli and mentally prepared himself for what might come next. The Yong Khan slowly stroked his beard and did not reply. Instead, he took another gulp from his cup of komas. The last time, when the Nayman came and stole several thousand of my livestock, it was only because of Temujin and his four aces that we were able to get the livestock back. Even though he doesn't have many men under him, each and every one of them is skilled and brave. Your highnesses must have witnessed that firsthand today. Sengam's face turned even angrier as he slammed the gold cup in his hand onto the table, causing a loud bang. What good am I really? What I have today is simply because of the attention and care that my adopted father showered on me. Temujin hurried to add. His four aces? Who are they? I want to meet them. Wanyan Hongli changed the subject as well. Why don't you summon them inside? The young Khan asked Temujin. Temujin lightly clapped his hands and 4 men walked into the chair. The first one looked gentle and scholarly with a white, clean face. He was the master of strategy, Mukuli. The second man had a strong, sturdy build and his eyes were as piercing as eagles. He was none other than Temujin's good friend, Bagurchi. The third man was short but agile and his steps were light and swift. He was Tulu's master Borokal. The last one's face and hands were covered with battle scars and his face was blood red. This was the man who had saved Temujin's life so many years ago, Chalan. The 4 of them were the founding generals in Rising of Mongolia and were called the 4 Aces by Temujin. After looking at them, Wanyan Hongli praised each one somewhat and then awarded all of them with a big cup of komas. On the battlefield today, there was a general with a black cape who led the charge through enemy formations. Nobody could stop him. Do you know who he was? Wanyan Hongli inquired after the 4 aces had finished their drinks. Thought's a squad leader that I just recruited, Temujin answered. Everyone calls him Jeb. Then why don't we invite him in for a drink as well? Wanyan Hongli suggested. Temujin turned and issued the command. Jeb entered the jeer and properly gave thanks for the reward of a drink. He was just about to drink when he was interrupted. How dare you, a measly squad leader, drink from my gold cup? Sengam shouted. Jeb was shocked and furious but stopped the cup as it came up to his lips. He looked over at Temujin for the proper course of action. In Mongolian culture, stopping someone from drinking is an enormous insult. Not to mention that this was done in front of all these people. How could anyone bear such an insult? For my adopted father's sake, I'm going to let Sengam get away with this insult. Temujin decided to turn to Jeb. Bring it over here. I'm thirsty, let me drink it. He took the cup from Jeb's hands and drank all of its contents in one gulp. Jeb shot an angry look towards Sengam, turned, and began to walk out of the chair. Come back here. Sengam commanded fiercely, but Jeb just ignored him and walked out of the chair with his head held high. Even though brother Temujin has his 4 aces, I have something that could defeat all 4 of them as soon as I let it loose. Unhappy that things were not working out to his liking, Sengam changed the subject. He chuckled when he said that. Even though he called Temujin brother, he was not an Anda of Temujin. He only did it because his father was Temujin's adopted father. Really? What could that be? What could be that powerful? Wanyan Honks's interest was piqued by that statement. Well, we can go outside and I can show you, Sengam said. We are having a good time drinking, what are you trying to stir up now? Ongkon objected. Just sitting here and drinking is getting boring, let's see something different. Wanyan Honksi very much wanted to see some trouble started, so much so that he had already stood up by the time he finished his sentence and walked out. The others had no choice but to follow him. The Mongolian troops had started several hundred campfires and were celebrating beside them. When the Khans exited the chair, there was a huge rumble as a large section of troops to the west stood up immediately. They were lined up in perfect formation, not one of them was moving. They were none other than Temujin's troops. To the east, the Ongkon's troops, slowly and disorganized, picked themselves up from the ground. There were even faint sounds of joking to be heard within their ranks. Even though the Ongkon's troops are much more numerous, they can't compare with Temujin's troops. Wanyan Hongli concluded upon seeing this display. Wine! Temujin called. He had noticed, in the glow of the fire, that Jeb's face was still showing fury. So he ordered that a big jug of wine be brought to him. Today's tremendous victory over the Naiman was a result of everyone's hard work and dedication. He loudly declared to everyone. It's because we were led by Ongkon, Temujin Khan, and Jamuka. All of the soldiers answered in one voice. Today, I saw someone who was especially brave, charging the enemy's rear no less than 3 times. He shot down several dozens of the enemy, Who was he? Temujin asked. Squad leader Jeb. The soldiers answered again. No, not squad leader, but company commander Jeb. Temujin corrected. Everyone was momentarily taken aback before realizing what he meant and began to cheer. Jeb is a great warrior. He well deserves to become a company commander. They all shouted with approval. Bring my helmet to me. Temujin instructed Jelm. Soon Jelm returned with the helmet and presented it to him. This is the helmet that I wear onto the battlefield. This is the helmet that I wear as I kill my enemies. Temujin raised the helmet high above his head for everyone to see. Now this will be a cup for a warrior to drink from. He opened the jug of kumis and poured all of its contents into the helmet. Bringing it up to his lips, he took a huge gulp from the helmet and then offered it to Jeb. Overwhelmed with gratitude and with lowered head, Jeb knelt down on one knee to receive the helmet and finish the rest of the kumis. Even the most precious diamond-studded gold cup in the world cannot compare with my Khan's helmet, he said in a low voice. Temujin smiled as he took his helmet back and put it back on his head. The Mongol troops had all caught word of how Jeb had been humiliated by Sangam and felt bad for him. Even those troops under the Ong Khan had thought that Sangam was wrong in what he did. Now, seeing how Temujin treated him, they all burst out with a great cheer. What a man among men this Temujin is! At this moment Jeb would gladly die 1,000 times for him. Wanyan Hongli thought to himself. Back in the imperial court all the officials insisted that the north is populated by brainless barbarians. It's obvious that they have grossly underestimated these people. But Wanyan Hongxi was only concerned with finding out what was that thing that Sangam claimed could defeat all four of the aces. So what is it that you have thought so powerful that it could defeat all four of the aces? He said, as he casually sat back down onto the tiger fur-covered chair that his personal servants had carried out. I invite your highness to get ready to see something very special. 4 aces my foot. They probably won't even measure up to those 2 bastards of mine. Sangam quietly said with a smile before turning around to the troops and loudly asked. Where are my brother Temujin's 4 aces? The 4 men came walking up and saluted their superiors. Sangam turned and whispered something to the trusted servant at his side who nodded before running off. Soon after, the sound of roaring beasts could be heard as a pair of huge golden leopards came gracefully out from behind the gyre. As they slowly approached in the darkness, the leopard eyes glowed like a pair of jade lanterns. This gave Wanyan Hongxi quite a fright as he immediately gripped the handle of his saber tightly. Only when the leopards walked close to one of the bonfires did he see that, in fact, there was a leash and collar around their necks and each leopard had a big fellow on the other end of the leash. Both had a long stick in their other hand, and, as it turned out, they were specially charged with raising and taking care of the leopards. Mongolians love raising leopards for hunting purposes. Not only do leopards run faster than hunting dogs, they are especially feisty. Being caught by the leopard means instant death for whatever they are set upon. The only drawback was that the leopards consumed a great deal of food. So only royalty or top officials could afford to keep leopards. Although the leopards were restrained by men, they were still snarling and clawing while glaring viciously at everyone. The muscles on their bodies looked as if they contained boundless energy within them, ready to explode at any moment. Wanyan Hongxi felt his heart get a little fluttery and he was exceedingly uncomfortable. From the power and might that these 2 leopards were showing, it looked as if they could easily break out of the grip of their masters should they choose. Brother, if those 4 aces of yours are truly great warriors and can subdue these 2 leopards of mine bare-handed, then I'll be truly convinced, Sangam said, turning towards Temujin. The 4 aces were furious as the same thought ran through their minds. You humiliated Jeb, now you are going to humiliate us? Are we just game? Are we wild wolves? Why should we fight your leopards? Temujin was far from happy about this whole proposal as well. I love my men like my own life, how can I let them fight a leopard? Is that so? Sangam burst out with a loud laugh. Then why claim to be 4 aces or whatever you want to call them? They're not even brave enough to fight my leopards. Of the 4 aces, Jalon's temper was the shortest and he could not stand such an insult any longer. He took a huge step forward. My great Khan, it doesn't matter if they laugh at us, but we cannot allow you to be shamed, he said to Temujin. I'll fight the leopards. Wanyan Hongxi was ecstatic to hear this. So much so that he removed a bright red ruby-studded ring from his finger and tossed it on the ground, proclaiming, if you can beat the leopard, then that's yours. Jalon did not even give the ring a look before lunging forward, only to be held back by Mukuli. Our names are known throughout the steppe, because we have defeated so many foes. Can a leopard command an army? Can a leopard ambush or surround enemies? Mukuli reasoned loudly. Brother Sangam, you win, Temujin said as he bent down, picked up the ring, and placed it in Sangam's hand. Sangam immediately put the ring on one of his fingers and let out a triumphant laugh as he raised his hand to show off his newly won ring. Ong Khan's troops began to cheer in response. Jamuka stayed silent throughout but was frowning heavily. Temujin kept a calm expression on his face. The 4 aces bitterly retreated back to their ranks. Disappointed and terribly unhappy about not seeing a man versus leopard fight, Wanyan Hongxi asked Ong Khan for 2 female slaves and retired to his own gyr. Next morning, Talui and Go Jing ran off to play. Hand in hand, they made their way far from the main camp. Suddenly a white rabbit ran by right in front of them. Talui brought up his little bow and arrow, aimed, shot, and hit the rabbit squarely in the belly. Because he was so young the arrow lacked power, so even though it was a direct hit, it was not immediately fatal and the rabbit scuttled off screeching with the arrow embedded in it. The 2 little kids, screaming at the top of their lungs, chased after the rabbit. After running for quite a while, the rabbit finally collapsed. The 2 kids let out a simultaneous cheer and were just about to retrieve the rabbit when 7 or 8 kids suddenly came pouring out from the woods from one side. One particular kid, who was of about 12 years or so, was quick to recognize the situation and grabbed the rabbit. He pulled the arrow from the rabbit's belly, threw it on the ground, shot a fierce look into Louis and Go Jing's direction, before stomping off with the rabbit. Hey, I shot that rabbit, why are you taking it? Louis shouted. The kid whirled around and came back. Who says that you shot it? He laughed. Well, this arrow is mine, isn't it? The older kid's eyebrows suddenly rose and his eyes bulged out. This rabbit was my pet, you are lucky I'm not asking you to pay for it. He shouted back. You are lying, this is obviously a wild rabbit. Louis shot back. The kid became even angrier and he walked up and shoved Louis. Watch out who you are accusing. My grandpa is the Ong Khan, my dad is Sangam. Do you know that? Even if you did shoot this rabbit, I'm taking it anyway. What can you do? My dad is Temujin. Louis proudly answered. Pay. So what if he's Temujin? Your dad's a coward. He's scared of my grandpa and scared of my dad. The kid's name was Daksh and he was Sangam's only son. After having a daughter, Sangam had to wait several years before finally having a son. After him, he had no other offspring. He had always spoiled his son, letting him bully as he pleased. Temujin, Ong Khan, and Sangam had not met for a long time. Even though their sons had met before, this was, for all practical purposes, their first true meeting. Hearing someone make fun of his father, Louis was filled with anger and proudly shouted back. Says who? My dad's not afraid of anybody. When your mom was kidnapped, it was my grandpa and my dad who went and took her back for your dad. You think I didn't know that? So what's the big deal if I just take this measly little rabbit of yours? Even in the past, Sangam was envious of Temujin's fame. When they helped Temujin that one time, Sangam made sure to tell everyone about it. Even his son had heard it many times. Temujin had always viewed that event as an incredible embarrassment for himself, He naturally never told Talui about it. Hearing this at this moment, Talui was so mad that his face turned purple. "You're a liar. I'm going to tell my dad," he angrily threatened before turning around and walking off. "Your dad's afraid of my dad, so what if you tell him?" Daksh laughed at Talui. "Last night, when my dad brought out his 2 leopards, your dad's 4 asses were so afraid they couldn't even move. Of the 4 aces, Borokl was Talui's master." Hearing this only made Talui even angrier. So angry he could barely speak. "My master isn't even afraid of tigers, why would he be afraid of leopards? He just didn't want to fight wild animals," he finally stuttered out. Daksh took a step forward and suddenly slapped Talui squarely on his face. "How dare you talk back to me? Aren't you afraid of me?" he yelled. Talui was startled as his cheeks instantly turned blood red. He wanted to cry, but would not let himself. Gojing had been seething on the side all this time, but now he could no longer hold back. He suddenly lunged forward and rammed his head straight into Daksh's stomach. This caught him by surprise and knocked him flat on his back. "Yay!" Talui clapped for joy for a moment before grabbing Gojing's hand and trying to run away. "Kill those 2 boys!" Daksh screamed, still on the ground. Daksh's companions ran up to the 2 boys and a fierce fight quickly broke out. Daksh picked himself up from the ground and angrily charged into the fray. Daksh's gang was older than the boys, to begin with, and also outnumbered them. They were able to pin down Talui and Gojing very quickly. "Give up? Give up?" Daksh shouted as he continually rained punches onto Gojing's back. Gojing tried with all his might to get back up but was weighed down by his foe's weight. At his side, Talui was also being ganged up on by 2 kids. It was at this precarious moment that the sound of horse bells could be heard coming from just over a sand dune as a small group of riders appeared. The leading rider was a short, fat fellow riding on a yellow horse. Seeing the kids fighting in the distance, he let out a little laugh. "Ha, fighting." Only when he rode closer for a better look did he realize that it was 7 kids bullying 2 much smaller kids. They'd pinned them down on the ground and were beating them. The 2 smaller kids' faces were already full of bruises. "Shame on you. Let them go," he shouted. "Piss off." Daksh shouted back. "Do you know who I am? I'll beat up whoever I want to, and you can't do anything about it." His father was one of the most powerful men in the north, so he was used to bullying everyone and nobody dared to challenge him. "How dare you act like that? Let go of them," the rider on the yellow horse yelled back. By this time, the rest of his group had joined him. "Third brother, stop meddling in affairs that don't concern us, let's go." There was a woman in that group. "Look at them, what kind of fighting is this?" the rider on the yellow horse replied. These riders were the 7 freaks of the south. They had followed Duan Tiandi all the way north onto the steppe before losing his trail. These past 6 years, they had roamed up and down this steppe in search of Duan Tiandi and Li Ping. All 7 of them had actually learned Mongolian by this time, but they still could not find any clues as to the whereabouts of Li Ping. The 7 freaks were all stubborn characters, and very competitive as well, so even if faced with ordeals 10 times more difficult and more dangerous than this, they would not concede this bet to Qiuchuji. Without ever conferring, the 7 of them had the same plan. Even if they never find Li Ping, they would still search until the 18 years was up. At that time they would go to Pavilion of the Drunken Immortal in Jiaxing and admit defeat to Qiuchuji's face. Besides, Qiuchuji might not find Yang Taizin's widow either. If neither side could find their widow, then a tie would result and then maybe another challenge would be issued. 2 against 1, we can't allow that. Han Xiaoying hopped off of her horse and pulled the 2 kids that were sitting on Talui's back off of him. Suddenly realizing that all the weight was off of his back, Talui struggled to get up. Daksh paused for a moment and Gojing took advantage. He flipped his body violently and crawled out from between Daksh's legs. The 2, having finally freed themselves, immediately tried to run away. "Go after them!" Daksh yelled as he led the rest of his gang in hot pursuit. Seeing these little Mongolian kids fight reminded the 7 freaks of all the misadventures that they had together when they were little, causing them to smile quite fondly at the memories. "It's time to go. Let's get to the market ahead before it disperses, or else we will miss a chance to ask the people there," Kazhanur suggested. By this time, Daksh's little gang had caught up to Talui and Gojing once again and surrounded them. "Do you give up?" Daksh demanded. Talui, still looking very angry, did not reply but instead fiercely shook his head. "Well, you asked for it." The kids converged upon one another yet again. Suddenly there was a cold flash as a little dagger suddenly materialized in Gojing's hand. "You want some of this?" Li Ping, out of love for her son, had already given him the dagger that her husband left her to carry around. She felt that this object was good for warding off evil and had intended that this dagger protect her son from evil spirits. Because of the bullying Gojing was receiving, he pulled it out. Seeing that he had a weapon with him, none of Daksh's gang was brave enough to challenge him. Magical hand scholar Zhu Kong was already on his way when a sudden flash caught his eyes. The way the dagger reflected the sunlight lit up his heart. "This reflection is incredibly strong. I've got to see what this precious little toy is." Having stolen from government treasuries and rich gentry's vaults all his life, he was quite an expert at discerning precious objects. He immediately pulled his horse around and saw that one of the kids had a dagger in his hand. The dagger reflected a blue light that flickered endlessly, obviously an extremely rare weapon. But how did it end up in the hands of a little kid? Looking over the kids again, he noticed that other than Gojing, all the other kids were wearing expensive shirts made of leopard skins. But Gojing made up for it by having a golden crown-looking ring on top of his head. Obviously, the kids were all members of wealthy and influential Mongol families. The kid probably stole his father's favorite knife to play with. Stealing from kings and aristocrats won't cause too much harm. Once he made up his mind, he jumped off of his horse and smiled sweetly as he approached the kids. "Come on everyone, stop fighting. Play nice." As he was talking, he suddenly flashed into the circle of kids and grabbed the knife. Having devoted an incredible amount of training to capturing weapons with bare hands, only the best martial arts masters could hope to stop him from taking their weapons, never mind a small kid like Gojing. As soon as the dagger was in his hand, Zhu Kong immediately scuttled out of the circle and hopped onto his horse. With a jerk of the reins, he laughingly galloped off and caught up to the rest of his group. "Well, today wasn't a total loss. I ended up with this little gem." He laughed quite heartily at his success.